So, hey guys, today we're going to be talking about hand traps and specifically traps that are also hand traps. So, we have a couple cards. Well, not just hand traps, I suppose, but just traps that can activate from hand in general, I guess, because the amount is surprisingly high. So, first off, we gotta start with, of course, infinite impermanence. So, infinite impermanence requires you to activate this. Uh, from hand only if you control no other cards. So that includes other copies of Infinite Impermanence. So if I were activating Infinite Impermanence, I could not activate a second Infinite Impermanence in my hand in the same chain. Unlike with Effect Failure, I'd be able to do so. So let's say we have this chain order. Chain Link 1, activating some monster's effect. Chain Link 2, Imperm. Chain Link 3, Crossout. You cannot stack on top of this chain link with like chain link 4 infinite impermanence. But if it were effect valor instead, you would be able to do so. And then we have the dominance cards, which I recently noticed actually have kind of disgusting-ish text. So, all right, dominance purge. If your opponent controls the card, so kind of the opposite of infinite impermanence, I suppose. You can activate this card from your hand. When a card or effect is activated, that includes an effect that adds a card or cards from the deck to the hand, negate that effect. Then if you have a trap in your graveyard, destroy that card. If you activate this card from your hand, you can activate the effects of dark, water, and fire monsters for the rest of this duel. But of course, if you were to set Dominus Purge, you would be able to still activate the effects of those monster types, I guess. And it says here you can only activate one Dominus Purge per turn, meaning, oddly enough, if you open two copies of Dominus Purge, if your opponent were to do something like Special Summon Baron as nearly their first action, and then they negate Dominus Purge because you're using it on something that they really need to resolve, then if they have a second effect they really need to resolve, you can just purge that effect as well in the same turn, because you can only activate one Dominus Purge per turn. And same thing with Dominus Impulse, which works essentially the same, but has a different effect here, and also hits different attributes, where we have, in this case, Light, Earth, and Wind monsters are unable to activate their effects for the rest of this duel. Which is also a little bit interesting, because this could affect, like, Ken and Gen, just oddly enough. So let's just assume maybe you're gone. Like I don't think this deck fully makes sense, but you're playing Ken and Gen package, and well, actually, yeah, you can discard Lurie, so it makes some sense, I guess. You're playing a Ken and Gen package, and also like triple tactics talents and such, and your opponent is going to Dominus Impulse, maybe like attempt to special summon Lurie or something. And here, because Ken and Gen are Earth, I believe, Dominus Impulse is going to prevent your opponent from activating the mandatory effect of the cards you give them, which is kind of cool. But I don't know if this will actually come up. But if it does come up, it would be pretty cool. And also, because these cards exist to an extent, let's see. Does this say your opponent's cards, actually? No, it's any card effect that does this. Okay, so what I'm getting from this is if we could forcibly somehow add Dominus Impulse to our hand, then, well, we could Rongo with this, actually, and Perma Rongo our opponent. That's kind of nasty, actually. So Rongo Minion, for some reason, this is actually just a mandatory effect, and not like a cost type upkeep thing like Baguska. So this is a dark, so if I activate the effect of Dominus Purge, then I'll no longer be able to activate Rongo Miniad's effect to detach here. Don't know why it works like that, but sometimes you just gotta accept it. Rongo Miniad can genuinely never come back at this point in time, I believe. But alright, Rongo Miniad aside, we're going to now move on to just some traps you can just activate from hand in general, and not just specifically like hand traps. So in this case, now we have evenly matched. The end of the battle phase, if your opponent controls more cards than you do, you can make your opponent banish cards from their field face down so they control the same number of cards you do. If you control no cards, you can activate this card from your hand. So evenly matched, you can also activate this from your hand, and it's just mass removal. So it's not that much different from like a Raigeki or a Harpy's, just Harpy's Feather Duster, but being able to activate this is kind of interesting. So I'm thinking like even if we just had a Mirror Force that worked like this would be pretty good actually, surprisingly enough. A Mirror Force that activates from hand, well, it wouldn't be that great if it were regular Mirror Force, but if we had something akin to a Drowning Mirror Force or something like that, I think that would spice up the game a bit. So notably, Ryzeal actually has no way to interact with someone activating a spell or trap card. So if I were to activate evenly matched, we just resolve evenly matched. If I resolve Raigeki, we just resolve the effect of the Raigeki, essentially, right? And there's protection, I guess, from Raigeki specifically with the detonator, but it still is resolving because there are no like negates here. If I were to set like Dharma Karma Cannon though, you could just pop it with detonator. We can pop it with Plasma Hole. We can make a rank 4 that can pop it in the back row as well. All of those are just options you would have. But well, what is a little bit interesting about like just traps that you can just freely activate from hand, even if there are conditions tied to it, I think they're actually pretty neat to an extent. Well, there's actually quite a few more though. So we have, let's see, what was this card called again? It was Typhoon, I think. Yeah, Typhoon. Target one face-up spell trap on field, destroy it. If your opponent controls 2 or more spell traps, and you control no spell traps, you can activate this card from your hand. So you can technically use this as almost a quick effect. So, for example, this could be useful against Blue Eyes. Just oddly enough, you would be able to use this as a hand trap, kinda. But not really. But this could also be removal in case your opponent has like certain cards that would make this niche card useful, like Secret Village can be removed by Typhoon potentially. That's an idea. And I think this might be potentially good against maybe, I'm thinking Pendulum decks. Like not all the usages are coming. Well, I can't just, I don't have all of them off the top of my head here, but here's an idea, right? So if we do this Blue Eyes combo line, right? We normal summon Sage, then usually we will do Maiden effect. Not this Maiden, but yeah, this Maiden. We'll grab True Light, and then there's also the Link one, grabbing the field spell. So if you have the field spell and True Light up on the field, I should be able to just pop the True Light, which is kind of neat, right? And that's like one usage we could have for Typhoon here, for example. But okay, so here's the thing now. So these are just traps you can activate from the hand, right? And the effects are, for the most part, with the exception of pretty much just evenly matched, I guess. Evenly matched has like fairly strict activation conditions, I suppose, at least. But yeah, the power level is not that high. So we have negate one monster, we have pop a single spell or a trap, and it has to be specifically a face-up spell or trap, making it even more niche. Then we have Dominus Purge, which is essentially just a bad Ash Blossom. It doesn't cover all of the same effects that Ash Blossom would. So it's actually very chain blockable in something like, for example, tier limits, right? And then we have Dominus Impulse, which is a little bit better because special summoning is a lot more generic than just adding a card to the hand, I believe. So there are some cards that like set cards from deck now, place cards from deck, like the Voiceless Voice continuous spell, which you would only be negating for one turn, unless you're able to also destroy it because you have another trap in the graveyard. But yeah. And of course, the last one I think worth mentioning as kind of like a typical trap you can activate from hand, we have Red Reboot. So Red Reboot is exceptionally strong in ways that other cards are not. So with Red Reboot, we have the fact of when your opponent activates a trap card, negate the activation. If you do, set that card face down. Then they can set one other trap directly from their deck for the rest of this turn. After this card resolves, your opponent cannot activate trap cards. You can activate this card from your hand by paying half your life points. So what makes Red Reboot really exceptional? Like, before we consider the actual effect on these cards, if you consider the situation which you need to activate the cards, well, evenly matched requires you to essentially be going second. Otherwise, there's no real hope of resolving evenly matched typically, or it would be really inefficient to do so. And then with Typhoon, this is pretty just generically kinda ish usable, but you can't control any spells or traps to activate Typhoon from hand, but it's fine because you can just set it, and then you can just destroy a face-up spell or trap on the field, I guess. Infinite Impermanence is like just a lot more flexible in usage than these other cards, I guess. There was the timing thing that made it a little bit worse than Effect Failure, and then Dominus Purge and Impulse, their conditions are simultaneously like really good and really bad. So really good in the sense that you can just drop this whenever your opponent controls a card. So if I activate Reinforcement of the Army, I control Reinforcement of the Army, allowing me to be purged, essentially. And then same kind of deal with like Dominus Impulse. If I were to be activating Branded Fusion, I control Branded Fusion, do I not? So that should be impulsable. And then Red Reboot. This is just something you can do in response to your opponent activating any trap. But the one primary difference between all of these cards and Red Reboot specifically is this is a counter trap, meaning that there's no response you can make to this except with another counter trap, which there are no counter traps except for Red Reboot that can be activated during this timing window. So what makes Red Reboot exceptionally interesting, in my opinion, would be something like the idea that Red Reboot actually would end the chain whenever you're activating it because it's a counter trap. The only thing you should be able to activate for the most part, aside from like Assault and Judgment, would be just Red Reboot itself. Well, I guess like certain other counter traps would work, but the main thing I'm thinking about is just Red Reboot would be able to chain to Red Reboot itself. And there's actually no hard once per turn on Red Reboot, so technically you could just keep trading Red Reboots for a while. So it could be like Chainlink 1, activate some crap, Chainlink 2, Red Reboot, Chainlink 3, Red Reboot, Chainlink 4, Red Reboot, Chainlink 5, Red Reboot. But again, and at this point in time, the only card that you could activate on top of this would be technically, I guess, another Red Reboot, and then chaining to that card, another Red Reboot, and then you should have nothing else you'd be able to chain. So this would be assuming maybe I'd be going first, and my opponent is trying to drop some trap hand traps on me, and I have a Red Reboot. This is a way you could utilize Red Reboot, I suppose. And now that I think about it, is Red Reboot good against Malice? It might be. Decent at least. Because with Red Reboot in particular, because this has such insane spell speed, being a counter trap and all, if we summoned Allied Code Talker, you wouldn't be able to prevent like a Red Reboot, which is kind of interesting to an extent, I guess. But alright, continuing on. This actually, well, this list here, this, well, these aren't all of the traps that can actually be activated from your hand. There are actually a few more. Quite a few more, surprisingly enough. So, traps being activatable from the hand, I think it's not like that big of a deal. It just allows you to play around back row removal a little bit better. And I think that in of itself is kind of neat. But like if you overdo it and it makes like, I guess, back row removal useless, that's where we kind of have a bit of a problem. But we're not really there yet in terms of like needing to worry about this stuff. So not a big deal at the moment, I suppose. But yeah, a lot of these traps are actually just relatively, I guess, balanced, I suppose. Like even Red Reboot, despite being kind of crazy, it's only like crazy against like traps specifically. If you're not running any traps, this card's literally worthless, right? If your opponent isn't going to even activate a trap card, then what is this realistically doing? And if they only activate one, then it's just a 1-for-1 trade, which is still just like okay, but they also do get to set a trap directly from the deck, which is not necessarily ideal. All right. So the remaining cards that can activate from your hand, so specifically the traps that uh, I can think of is, well, if you have specifically, so I know Molokiris does not have this effect, right? Yeah. So if you have specifically Opa Binia on the field, it has the effect of you can activate Paleozoic trap cards from your hand, and actually, wait, if I recall correctly, I think Trap Tricks actually has a card that does what Opa Binia does. So there are actually quite a few more cards, or yeah, quite a few more cards that, or specifically trap cards that can be activated from your hand. But yeah, we have, if this card has a trap card as XYZ material, you can detach one XYZ material from this card, add one Paleozoic trap from your deck to your hand. And then when we pair it with this effect, technically, I guess you could also be playing like transaction rollback, but technically, I suppose, every single one of these cards is now activatable from your hand. And also, while we're at it, there are no hard once returns on any of the Paleozoic cards. So technically, we could go like, activate Dynamiscus, activate Dynamiscus, activate Dynamiscus, and that'd be 3 Dynamiscuses activating plus potential 4 traps set in your back row. So you're activating technically 7 traps and 7 interactions in that turn from just that, right? The ceiling for this could go higher. So we're just looking purely at ceiling here. I don't think this is like that reasonable to be able to do, honestly. But then you have like a transaction rollback as well, where you can roll back, and there's some other cards as well, like trap cards that can activate from the graveyard, aside from just rollback. But with rollback, we can copy one of our card effects here, and even if we already used that card effect once, so for example, like with Daruma, we already activated Daruma, we can still copy Daruma's effect, assuming Daruma would be hard once per turn. It is not, but even if it was, we'd be able to copy its effect and do it again, which is kind of whack. But let's take a quick look. Trap Tricks. Which one of these was it? And actually, now that I think about it, Magical Musketeers, I believe. actually can activate traps from the hand as well. So it's not as unique of a thing, I guess. Here we go. Attracts. You can activate whole normal trap cards from your hand, and then the magical muskets actually have this type of effect as well, right? Just kind of generically, right? During either player's turn, you can activate magical musket spell trap cards from your hand. And do they have a counter trap? They do. When your opponent activates a spell/trap card while you control a magical musket monster, negate the activation if you destroy that card. So pretty wild that they just have a counter trap that you can activate from the hand. And then we have a continuous here. Fiendish Deal. Okay. Does this do anything else? No, it's just protection mostly. But yeah, we can go like Last Stand effect, and this is a counter trap, so not much you can do to outplay this, even if you were to control a bear, which is wild. So there's a lot of room to actually make traps pretty disgusting. So we can make counter traps activatable from hand, which is not really respondable. So if we were to just ban Red Reboot, and then we were to activate cards like Last Stand, or just like Monster negate like Dominus Impulse, but as a counter trap type deal from the hand, then you can't hit it with backer removal, you can't really negate it, and the only way that you would be able to kind of deal with this would be if you were playing counter traps that you can activate from the hand as well, or just counter traps in general that would be able to activate. But since they can activate from the hand, it's like maybe just setting a Solemn Judgment would be too slow, actually. So, surprisingly, I feel like there's a lot of room to make just, I guess, trap cards a lot more disgusting, or even competitive with meta, to the point where it would become the meta, which I don't know if like people would really like this play style of Yu-Gi-Oh here, but I think it's something that could potentially kind of ish happen. Like you could technically print cards that allow for this type of gameplay. That's what I mean, right? Whether it's something like Konami would actually do in reality is like a little bit more questionable. I don't know if this would be good for the game. I mean, if it was very archetypal, I think it could be interesting at least. So yeah, potentially paleo support question mark. Maybe if we got some paleo support, we could make something happen for starters before going off the deep end and activating cards like Last Stand, you know, or Red Reboot. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys today. And I honestly think, well, a lot of these trap cards being niche makes them more generically usable, but having a few more niche and specific cards for more like archetypal use, I think would be a little bit more interesting than the generics here. Like, don't get me wrong, Typhoon is useful, like sometimes, but it's not going to be as useful as something I can run as engine and interruption type deal, right? Like with these paleo cards. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.